Hey, what is up everyone? With the Lair of LeChuck Tall Tale coming out this past week, and with it bringing an end to the Legend of Monkey Island crossover that we've had going on in Sea of Thieves over the last few months, I think it's a good time now to dive back in and talk about this latest Tall Tale, and then take a look at the collaboration as a whole. So first I kind of want to set the scene, because going into this Tall Tale, I was trying to be really hopeful, not necessarily just because, I want to enjoy it and stuff, but also because as of late, with everything that we've heard about Season 10, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the videos that I've made recently, there's been a lot of, people could say, negativity from my channel regarding Sea of Thieves, and I love the game, so I was really hoping I would have good stuff to say about this Tall Tale, and I do have good stuff to say about it, but I will say I did have a lot of problems with it, and I'm going to talk about it in this video. So the Lair of LeChuck is supposed to be this final culmination of this storyline that we've been doing with LeChuck, and he has the Burning Blade sword, and he's going to try to take Lane, and all that stuff. So I was interested to see how they would wrap this story up, because it really didn't feel like we had progressed much after the first two Tall Tales. Really, the first Tall Tale didn't add anything to the story, in my opinion, but I think it was a good introduction into the world of Monkey Island, and it kind of got you used to what the gameplay was going to be like, because obviously the gameplay in these Tall Tales is very different than the rest of Sea of Thieves. Everything from the voice acting for all the different dialogues, to just how the puzzles progress compared to past Tall Tales, and even like voyages and stuff that we're used to in Sea of Thieves. It was very different, so I think that first Tall Tale, while I do have my complaints about it, and you can go watch that review if you want, I think it was an introduction to how these Tall Tales would be laid out. But in terms of what it added to the story, it didn't really add anything other than, basically setting the scene. The second Tall Tale, I also didn't feel like added too much. It didn't really add anything further than what we already knew about what was going on. So really what it did was it just kind of let us explore Melee Island and talk to a lot of the characters and kind of expand the lore, but not really further the story that was going on. So with all that said, going into this third Tall Tale, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen, because there wasn't really much that had been done prior to this Tall Tale, in my opinion. With all that said, let's talk about what happens in this Tall Tale. So you start off and basically you're heading to Monkey Island. Guybrush meets you in the Sea of the Dam, and you're traveling together, and they're on the Black Pearl, which I thought was really cool, and that was nice to see again. And you get to sail next to it when you're in the Sea of the Dam, and then you'll see it's docked up at the island at Monkey Island. So once we got to Monkey Island, we had Guybrush waiting there for us, and he basically lays out what we have to do first. In order to get some sort of key, we need to find 3 of the monkey gold statue things and stuff. Very fetch questy type stuff that we were used to. It's, in my opinion, very similar to how the second Tall Tale was with the 3 legendary trials. And this wasn't a bad thing necessarily, in my opinion, because I actually did enjoy my time doing these, little missions to get the different monkey heads. I don't think it was bad or anything at all. I really did enjoy it. But if I were to recommend anything for people playing this, it may be better to do these in parts and really take advantage of that checkpoint system that Sea of Thieves has, because I spent about 3 hours doing this Tall Tale, and I was using a guide, so I was basically speed running it. If you're going in without a guide, it's going to take a lot more time. So I'm going to talk more about the time aspect in a little bit, but I think that's a big flaw with these Monkey Island Tall Tales, is just how much time it requires to do. And the reason why I think that's important is because the amount of time that it takes to do these Tall Tales really hurts the replayability, I think, of these Tall Tales. A great example of this is the Shores of Gold Tall Tale, where if you didn't have to do all that beginning stuff with all those puzzles, and you could just really go down and do more of the fun stuff with like the Gold Hoarder boss and like navigating through the tunnels and everything, a lot more people would probably replay that Tall Tale more. But basically, since you have to spend like an hour doing all the different vaults around that island before you can get to the more fun stuff, it really disincentivizes you from going back and replaying it. But with all that said, I did find myself enjoying going around and finding these monkey heads. I don't think it was as good as the 3 legendary trials that was in the second Tall Tale. I think with the second Tall Tale, it was very diverse activities that you were doing, with each of those different parts, so it didn't feel as long as this one. This one felt a lot longer because it was very similar what you're doing each of them. Each of them you figure out what the puzzle is to get the monkey head, you get it, you go put it on the thing, and then you have to go get another one, and you just keep doing that for all three of them. One thing that I really did like with this tall tale is I found it really cool how destructible the stuff was. So there's different parts of this tall tale where you shoot something or you throw something or whatever, and you'll see like the destruction and everything kind of fall apart and break. And I thought that was really cool. I know that's probably not a groundbreaking thing, but for Sea of Thieves where everything's very static and you can't really mess with the environment too much, I thought it was pretty cool to see that there was these things that you could like destroy and you just see like all fall apart and stuff. I found that really fun to do. So next I want to talk about the island itself. I really liked Monkey Island, what to do with it. It felt a lot more diverse than Melee Island, where you had like a jungle-ish area, then you had the more rocky area and lots of waterfalls and all this stuff, and it just looked really nice. I found it a little bit bright, and I'm assuming that's on purpose, but sometimes I was looking at my screen and my eyes would just be hurting from how like bright all the colors were and everything. Not trying to say that as a bad thing, but it was just a little bit, I guess, somewhat off-putting because I was trying to look at it and I was just like, is it supposed to look like this? But anyways, I really did like it. I loved the more rocky areas where you had all the waterfalls coming down, but then also there was like a bit of a swamp area that you can row through, and I thought that all looked really nice. And just kind of like some of the set pieces I thought was a lot more interesting. Like there's Guybrush's ship that was shipwrecked there. You have the big monkey head, of course. That looked cool, especially when you get to open that and go into LeChuck's lair. And we'll talk about LeChuck's lair more when we get to that part of the tall tale, but all of that was really interesting to look at too. But if we're talking about gameplay specifically, I did find Melee Island to be a lot more intuitive in terms of what you're supposed to do, whereas I found with Monkey Island, it was easy to get lost and not really sure where to go or where to look. It was very hard to like pinpoint what to do, and if you didn't have a guide, it was a lot more confusing. For the first two tall tales, I didn't use a guide. Basically, whenever we have these tall tales, what I like to do is just go through and play once on my own and just, you know, enjoy it, figuring it out for myself, and then I'll go back and replay it and do all the combinations and everything. But because of just a time crunch, I wanted to just use a guide and get through all the combinations all on the first playthrough. So that's why I did a guide this time and not the other two times. But honestly, I don't think I could have done this without the guide because it was just kind of hard to find everything. And one of the biggest problems I had in this tall tale was I would often find things that weren't supposed to be used until way later in the tall tale, and then I'd basically be confused because I'd have to like backtrack to find things later after I'd already discovered them and stuff, and it just didn't seem like as natural of a process as the first two tall tales on Melee Island. So to kind of summarize that, I feel like it was worse in terms of gameplay, but the island itself I found it more interesting to look at and run around in than Melee Island. So then I got all three monkey heads and unlocked the key that we needed to get into LeChuck's lair. And by this point, I was getting kind of tired and kind of wondering, like, okay, how much more of this is there? We haven't really got to all the set pieces that I had seen in the trailer. So I was kind of wondering, like, how much longer do I have here? Because I don't remember exactly what time it was by that point, but I would assume it was about 2 hours in to the tall tale. So for me, I found the first part a bit too long, and I wonder if there's like a way that they could speed it up, because while I did enjoy the activities that we were doing to do the different monkey heads, I found it a bit of a time waster. It felt more like fetch quest type stuff, as well as I didn't really want to continue doing the tall tale and get to the main action of this conclusion, because I was just kind of at that point overall done with it. But I pushed forward and I ended up going to the lair, and I found the lair to look really cool. I liked the tunnels that were in there with the lava. I thought the lava looked really nice, and just the environment and the design has been fantastic. I'll say this right now, for this whole Monkey Island collaboration, my two favorite things that Rare has done with this is the environmental design, so just going and exploring Melee Island, and Monkey Island, I found them both to look really interesting and cool and just very expansive. They're the biggest islands that we've had in the game. So just running around and looking at it, I think they've done a really great job with that, as well as the music. I've loved the Monkey Island music. It's probably my favorite part of the franchise. You've heard me use it as background music in videos for the last several years, so I've really liked that, and just getting some new original music for these Tall Tales has been great. Alright, that's enough praise. Let's talk about my next problem with this Tall Tale. So once we get into the lair, you know, it all looks really cool in there and stuff. You have this little head thing that's basically like your navigator, and whichever way it's pointing is the way you're supposed to go. And I think that was really cool. My problem with it was you were forced to go the wrong way until it decides that the path will open up. So it's not something where it's like, okay, it's leading you through and then like you just are trying to choose the right path. It just actually won't open and the path won't exist until you've gone around however many times it wants you to go around. I really didn't like that. I would have liked it to be more of like an open labyrinth down there, and if you listened ahead you could get through easily. If you didn't, you could get lost really easily. I think that would have been the better way to do it. It just kind of felt a little cheap that if you wanted to, you couldn't walk through there the way you would want to. And this is another example, I think, of Rare not really respecting players' time. I really feel like there's these little decisions that they make, especially with these Tall Tales, to increase player playtime and force the player to basically do these things that will keep them in the game as long as possible. And it really hurts the experience. So we already talked about like the 3 legendary trials from the second Tall Tale, as well as the finding the 3 monkey heads in this Tall Tale. Both of those were really just designed to keep you playing for a long time, because let's be honest, there's no real reason that we had to do any of that stuff. If you had to find 1 monkey head, that would have been fine, I think. But honestly, like, you have to find all 3. You're not even getting into the Lair of LeChuck, which is what the Tall Tale is named, until like 2 hours in. And by that point, you're kind of just over the Tall Tale in general. So that's really annoying. But then you have stuff like here, where you can't even go down the right path if you want, because they literally physically block it off until you go and loop-de-loops around the place. So it's little decisions like this, and we have more that we'll talk about later in the Tall Tale, that really annoyed me because I felt like my time was being wasted and that the game didn't respect the time that I was investing into the game. I would much rather play, say, a 1 hour, 2 hour Tall Tale that was very precise with the amount of time that you're spending, as opposed to what we've gone with these 3 Tall Tales, where it just does little things to try to waste your time. So continue on, you're navigating through these tunnels, and like I said, I really thought these tunnels looked really cool. It was probably my second favorite part of this Tall Tale, and I'll talk about my favorite part later on. But the tunnels, I just found the environment to look really interesting, and the tunnels did feel diverse. There was like pits of lava that were going down in a huge waterfall. There was these bridges that were segmented away from each other, and you'd like kind of jump between them and other things. So it didn't feel like you were just wandering through like a boring tunnel. It really did feel interesting. So I do appreciate that. Once we got through the tunnels though, we saw LeChuck's ship, and this I had some problems with, and I guess I'll go ahead and talk about the bugs that we've had in this Tall Tale, and honestly the other Tall Tales as well. So when you got to LeChuck's ship, you're supposed to hand the weird head thing to Guybrush, and I kept trying to do that. He just disappeared on me. Like legit, you could not see him at all, and I know he had the invisibility thing on. He was completely invisible to the player, and the only way that I was able to find him was I had to keep stopping, waiting for him to call and be like, hey, you're supposed to give me that, and then go try to trace his voice through the area, and then I found him basically invisible where I had to give him the thing. But you couldn't see him, and it was basically just luck that I'm trying to find the person, and you couldn't progress through the Tall Tale. I tried to get rid of the head and like throw it into the lava so that it would burn and maybe like let me progress through or something, but none of that worked. It kind of just sat there, which also broke a little bit of the immersion that the lava just doesn't do anything. So that was pretty frustrating, but I also had other bugs with just stuff not loading right, and I had the server crash a few times. Luckily, I was able to progress through the story and I didn't have to like redo anything. Unlike the last Tall Tale where I lost a lot of progress with the server crashing on me. At least it was a little bit better this time. But I had the game crash 3 times while I was doing the Tall Tale. So that's really terrible in my opinion. Especially when you consider that the game keeps getting delayed and stuff. Like these kind of issues should have been worked out before. And I really don't understand what the problem is. Because now some people are going to say like they didn't delay this update, but they really did if you think about it. These Tall Tales were supposed to come out at the beginning of summer. It's very clearly obvious to me that the 3 Tall Tales were meant to take up the summer months. And they were probably going to have it so that they would do it similar to how the Pirate's Life Tall Tales came out, where a week after the Xbox showcase, the first Tall Tale came out, and then it would progress after that. And that didn't happen. So we saw that the first Tall Tale got pushed back a good amount, and then obviously the second Tall Tale really got pushed back, basically to the very last day of August. And I really feel like the only reason that they released it on that final day of August, rather than pushing it back any further, is because they didn't want any more backlash from the community because of all the delays the game has had this year. So I'm not necessarily mad that there are bugs in these Tall Tales. I understand that software development is hard. Part of my job is doing software development, so I do understand the challenges that are involved with this. But my problem is when you continue to delay content into the game, and then when they finally do release, they're a buggy mess and sometimes just game breaking in general. It really is frustrating because it's like, why was it delayed in the first place? If it was already going to be a buggy mess when you released it, why delay it at all? In my opinion, if it's going to be delayed, it better be good when it comes out. If it's delayed a year, fine, but it shouldn't be buggy when it comes out. And that's kind of my thought process with it. But honestly, the most frustrating bug of my whole experience with this Tall Tale, and just these Tall Tales in general, is that you can't unlock the big reward for doing all the commendations for the Tall Tales. And this is not just a me issue, this is across the board. A bunch of people cannot access the final reward from completing all the commendations. And it's supposed to be the shanty, and I was trying to wait. The reason why I didn't make this video immediately after doing the Tall Tale was because one, I was tired, honestly. But the other reason is I was kind of hoping that they would fix the issue and I'd be able to listen to the shanty and give you guys more of a review on the reward. But as I'm recording this video on Friday night, they still haven't fixed the issue. I've tried multiple times to go in to the game and take a look at this, and it's just not working, and that really sucks. I don't really understand how you can have like your main reward from doing these Tall Tales not work. I can understand having issues with, server crashing, especially if you have a lot of people getting on to play it at the same time, and other smaller bugs, even like the thing with Guybrush being invisible, even though I'd say that's a really egregious one, because I almost had to quit the Tall Tale because I didn't know what to do. Luckily I was able to find Guybrush, but that was really terrible in terms of bugs that happened. But to have the reward, like something that should just be simple to have, hey, if X person got all these things unlocked, unlock this thing. And the fact that it's taken so long to fix it, I can understand maybe it being bugged the first day, but the fact that we're now 2 days in and it's still not fixed is just, what is going on over there? I had some other bug issues where characters were not where they're supposed to be, or just they would like walk through elements or whatever, and just other weird bugs and stuff. So I'm not going to go too far into those, but honestly it is a bit appalling, the quality that this Tall Tale especially, but even just all of them in general, have been. The fact that we keep seeing all these delays with Sea of Thieves, and then stuff keeps coming out and they're still very buggy and not well polished, is just very disappointing to me. That covers my big rant on the bugs. So let's move on to our next part. So setting the stage again, we're here, we have LeChuck. LeChuck sees Guybrush because Guybrush decides to take off his invisibility thing right when he sees LeChuck, even though the whole reason he was wearing the invisibility thing was so that LeChuck didn't see him. I didn't really understand that part of the story, but Guybrush, calls himself out for doing it in the Tall Tale, so I guess it's okay. It just seemed weird to me, but I did find the interaction funny. I liked seeing LeChuck's ship and just seeing LeChuck talk. I really like LeChuck as a villain. I think he's a pretty cool one. But then basically their ship goes away. They try to get away from us. And then you hear like a rumbling. And the Mad Monkey ghost ship that we saw in the second Tall Tale bursts through. And we have Elaine and Captain Kate capsize together on it, basically coming to our rescue. We end up boarding the ship, and then Guybrush convinces everyone that we need to go stop LeChuck because the safety of the Sea of Thieves world is in jeopardy. I mean, that's fine sentiment, but I really feel like that the story lacked a lot with these Tall Tales, because we really don't even know what LeChuck wanted to do with the Sea of Thieves world. It was really just like very cartoony villain, like, I'm gonna take over everything. What's your plan? What are you gonna do? I mean, really, the most that we got about it was he was gonna disguise himself as the Pirate Lord and take over. But he already kind of got away with that, and he did that. He got the Burning Blade when he disguised himself as the Pirate Lord back before these Tall Tales even started with the last adventure that we had in the game. So I really am curious, like, what was the plan? I'm very interested in like villains and like, you know, seeing their plan go through. I really liked Avengers Infinity War because we actually saw the villain won with Thanos. And I'm not necessarily saying that LeChuck should have won, even though that would have been interesting if he had won at the end of like the second Tall Tale, and then we had like almost like the Empire Strikes Back and then Return of the Jedi type of storyline. That would have been pretty cool to see, but they didn't do that, and that's fine. But really, I feel like the story with these Tall Tales is very lacking, because at a certain point you don't even really know what is the point. First you're trying to save Guybrush, then you're trying to save Elaine, then Elaine's saving Guybrush, and then now we're saving both Guybrush and Elaine again, and we don't know what LeChuck's really plan is. All I can really get is that he wants to marry Elaine and take over the Sea of Thieves world, which he could have probably taken over the Sea of Thieves world pretty easily as just disguising himself as the Pirate Lord. And one more thing I do want to mention with that, it feels like we're retreading waters again, because we already had like the fake Pirate Lord thing that happened last year with the DeMarco mystery that happened. So it feels like we're retreading waters a bit with the whole disguised Pirate Lord. Not saying that's a deal breaker or anything. I do find it kind of interesting of LeChuck being able to disguise himself as being like an evil Pirate Lord, but it feels a little bit weakened when that's already happened in the story already. Anyways, basically this continues, and after Guybrush convinces all of them, we start taking the ship and we're chasing LeChuck down the like lava tunnels. At first I thought this was extremely cool. I thought it was really fun that you could, you know, pilot the ship and you're just sailing through these lava tunnels, and then there's collapsing things that are coming down with like the rocks. LeChuck was basically shooting the cavern walls to make the rocks fall and close the path, and then you'd see Guybrush and Elaine shooting these rocks away. That was really cool. And then it got annoying, because this was another instance of wasting our freaking time. This set piece would have been really cool if it was about, you know, half the length. You just keep chasing them for so long, and it was so slow. You're not moving fast at all. And it's fine if you're not moving fast. I feel like obviously they want to make it easy enough for players to be able to like turn and stuff, and they're not hitting the walls too much, and you know, and there's not going to be wind really down there because you're not just a cavern. So that stuff's fine in my opinion. The problem is you're just chasing them for so long. It kind of felt like Star Wars The Last Jedi, where like that whole movie is just them on this like slow moving chase and like nothing's really happening. That's how it kind of felt with this. So after it got like halfway through, I'm just kind of sitting there like, how much longer am I gonna have to do this? This is really boring. It was really cool for a moment, and then it just went on way too long. It overstayed its welcome. Then finally it ended, and we get into this big cavernous area where there's different rocks and stuff that you can navigate around, and this is where you fight LeChuck's ship. And this was gonna be really cool, I thought, but my biggest problem was I was playing solo. Guybrush and Elaine would very rarely shoot at LeChuck's ship, so it was really up to me to shoot at LeChuck's ship, which is fine, but I also had to steer this galleon. And I don't know if y'all know this, but steering and shooting with the galleon solo is kind of difficult. You also had the sails to adjust and stuff, and there wasn't really any room to move. It's not like I could have it go in a circle that easily and then just shoot, because there was rocks that were in the way, as well as LeChuck's ship was just going around in weird directions and kind of like hiding from me. It eventually got to the point where I decided, like, okay, I'm just gonna raise the sails up and just sit in the middle and wait for him to come by and just shoot. And it was just getting really boring. And the most annoying part about the whole thing is, you know, you have Guybrush and Elaine there shooting cannons in the front, but then you have Kate Capsize, who's just standing next to the wheel, not doing anything, and just yelling at you every time that the ship gets hit. And I'm just kind of standing there like, can you not be helping at all? The way that I would have liked to have seen this is, after you get into the cavernous area, Kate Capsize should have just looked at you and said something like, get on the cannons, I'll take the wheel, or something like that. And then basically it would be the AI that's navigating the ship around the cavern, and you're just kind of like shooting at LeChuck's ship along with Guybrush and Elaine. That's how it should have been. Now, obviously this would be a lot better and more fun if you had more people, and that's perfectly fine. But the fact that I was playing solo, and I feel like a lot of people probably goes into this playing solo, really ruined the experience. I absolutely hated this part. It would have been way more fun if I could have just shot the cannons at LeChuck's ship and then watched him get destroyed. And this was also another area that was another time waster, in my opinion, because you'd have to defeat LeChuck's ship multiple times. You'd, you know, go for him, you'd shoot him, his ship would disappear, and then it would reappear. And in my opinion, when you have something like that, it doesn't make sense to me. How are you supposed to ever know if you've actually won or defeated them if you hitting him and then him disappearing looks exactly the same as when you finish? So those are a lot of problems. I think this was probably the worst part of the Tall Tale in my opinion, which really sucks because it's supposed to be like your main set piece other than what we're about to talk about. So yeah, I wasn't too happy as this Tall Tale progressed. I was optimistic at the start, was kind of okay with the monkey stone statue things during the middle, got into the lair, kind of starting to get annoyed by the time waster stuff, and then we got into this part where it's basically unplayable for someone that's playing solo like me. So moving on, we supposedly defeat LeChuck's ship, and then LeChuck, I don't know if this was a bug or if this is how it's supposed to be. It kind of looked like a bug to me, but I really couldn't tell. LeChuck appeared in the air above our ship, and then he basically possessed Elaine and Guybrush and made them both come back to Melee Island so that he could marry Elaine, and basically made them like his prisoners and stuff. Fine, whatever. It does seem a little bit weird to me, like he could have just possessed us, the player, and Kate Capsize so that we couldn't, you know, fight against him. I'm not gonna question it too much because obviously the story needs to progress. You kind of have to suspend your disbelief. But it was a little bit weird for the story reasons. Like, if he really just didn't want us messing with him anymore, he could have just like put a stop to us, honestly. But we continue forward. We go back to Melee Island, and when we're there, we basically burst into the church. And this was by far my favorite part of this Tall Tale. I thought this scene was really cool. You go into the church, and it turns into a full-on cutscene. So we've had times in Sea of Thieves where it's kind of been like a cutscene, but you could still move around and stuff, and you were basically the camera for the cutscene. This time, it was full taking control, and it was very unique. And I hope we see more of this from Sea of Thieves, because I'm someone that, in gaming, I love cutscenes. I don't know if it's for everyone, but for me, I love a really nice, well-done cutscene. I just find them really cool. And this was really interesting to see, where you just have a Guybrush and like you're on the floor, you can see like your hands and stuff looking around, and you're trying to like fight back and everything. You see the Pyro Lord come in, Pyro Lord's getting attacked, and then eventually we see Kate Capsize come and like rescue and save the day, and that's cool. I think it would have been way better. The only critique I have about this part with the church scene is that when the sword gets knocked out of LeChuck's hands and it gets close to us, instead of it disappearing, it would have been far cooler if our character picked up the sword and then used that against LeChuck. Because then it would also make sense why you have it as the reward at the end of the Tall Tale. But this would have been a really cool scene because you could just like, you know, pick it up and then you challenge him to the insult sword fighting. And that's what led into the next part. After you get to the church scene, you do the insult sword fighting. This one, honestly, I didn't like it that much. I found it annoying for several reasons. One, it again felt way too slow. I found several times I'm just trying to hit him and then just like waiting for him to do the insult so I could just keep progressing. It just felt very slow and it wasn't an engaging fight, and it also didn't feel that dynamic. Like, honestly, I know this is a little bit more advanced for Sea of Thieves, we haven't seen this in the game before, but it would have been cool if we had more like almost like quick time event actions or whatever happening, where like you are fighting LeChuck and then maybe it zooms the camera in and then you have to like hold it as you're blocking or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that would have been the most interesting gameplay, but really this was very boring feeling. And I think it might even been worse than the insult sword fighting that we had in the previous Tall Tale, because in this one, you couldn't even throw insults back at LeChuck. All you had to do was just retort to stuff that he said to you. So it was very one-sided, and I didn't like that at all. And then the other problem I had with it is, just like with the fighting him in a ship, he kept disappearing and then I would have to go find him. And this is where it started bugging out again for me, where I'd basically fight him, he would, you know, poof, disappear, and then I'd be trying to look for him again, and I would basically be running around the entire streets, can't find him. Eventually I'd go back and he'd finally appear, and I'm just like, where have you been? I've run through here multiple times. So that, I didn't like any of that. But then we get to the end and you use like the root beer that we saw in the first Tall Tale to finally defeat him. And we have like a little cutscene with, you know, the different characters, and there's fireworks going on. All that stuff's fine. It was a little bit of a lackluster ending to me. I really liked the church scene, but then the insult sword fighting with LeChuck was very slow and a bit of a slog. And then the ending little cutscene of them talking wasn't that interesting, in my opinion. I think you can tell that I'm a bit disappointed with this Tall Tale. I'm not trying to say that it's bad. I really do think this would be significantly better if they cut out a lot of these things that wasted so much time. If the gameplay was a lot more snappy and they didn't have all these different mechanics that force the player to have to spend more time in the Tall Tale than is really needed, I think would make this experience far more enjoyable. I really do recommend, if you haven't done the Tall Tale yet, I don't really know why you're listening to this video, because I just spoiled the whole thing, so sorry about that. But honestly, if you're gonna do this Tall Tale, or if you're gonna replay it, I think really the only way you can do this and not like hate it is if you utilize the checkpoints. I think once you get through like the monkey heads part, I would honestly just like stop at that checkpoint, go play the regular game or go play another game or something like that, and then come back later, because trying to do it all at once really just feels very slow and not very fun. I'm very glad that I did all the accommodations on my first run through, because I don't think I'm gonna go through this Tall Tale again, maybe ever. It was not great, and that really sucks for me, because I really wanted to go into this and have something good to talk about Sea of Thieves. I feel like I haven't had that great of stuff to say about the game, as we've had, you know, all the different news that's come out this past year with all the delays, and then what they announced for Season 10. There's just hasn't been a lot of things in the game that have made me excited to play or excited to talk about. I'm kind of disappointed with this Tall Tale for multiple reasons, not just specifically the Tall Tale itself. However, there is one more good aspect I can talk about with this Tall Tale, and that is the rewards. So with the other two Tall Tales, I have been very critical about the Tall Tale rewards that we've gotten with them, because they haven't really been that great. They've all been trinkets and stuff, which isn't necessarily bad, but the trinkets they gave us weren't that good looking or interesting, so that was very disappointing. But there was one reward that I was very hopeful that we'd get, and we did, and that's the Burning Blade sword. Now this is the corrupted version of the Sword of Souls, and which was another Tall Tale reward, and I'm very happy that we actually ended up getting it, and it really does look nice. I really like the way it looks in the game. It might be slightly too bright. I like my Forsaken Ashes sword a little bit better, I think, because it's kind of a similar with like the glowing orange and stuff, but it's a little bit more muted, so it's not as bright. But I do really like the look of it. We also got another reward with this, which is a trinket of LeChuck, and this is fine. I'm not too interested in it, to be honest, but I don't think it's a bad reward. I like it better than the other trinkets that we've gotten with these tall tales. That's good there. And then the final reward, which I mentioned earlier in this video, was we got a Monkey Island shanty. I've listened to it online. It sounds really great. It's the main theme that we've had for the Legend of Monkey Island Tall Tales. You've probably heard it in the background of some of my videos. I really love the Monkey Island music, especially the theme that we had with this. So I'm very happy to have this shanty in the game if, you know, they ever fix the bug and it unlocks for me. So I'm happy that we got that. I do wish we had gotten the shanty that I talked about in the previous Tall Tale, but in general I think it's great that we have the shanty. But overall, if we're looking at all these Tall Tale rewards, it's pretty bad. I feel like these rewards for this Tall Tale like met the bare minimum basically. Like the Burning Blade Sword was pretty obvious that should have been a Tall Tale reward. I'm glad they did that. The shanty was kind of something that was expected because, you know, Monkey Island is just the franchise so known for its music, as well as we had gotten a shanty as the final reward for the Pirate's Life Tall Tales. So it kind of, you know, we all kind of figured that we would get a shanty for like doing all the accommodations. But then if you look at the other Tall Tale rewards like LeChuck's picture and then the other trinkets, compared to what we've gone with previous Tall Tales, these are just very lackluster and not great. I don't think they're the worst Tall Tale rewards that we've gotten. There's definitely some that are worse, but these aren't great. If you've looked at stuff that we've had in the past, we've obviously gotten the Sword of Souls, we've gotten like the Morningstar sales and just other stuff. I've made a video talking about all of them, but I just don't really like them. If you like them, that's great. Just for me, I don't think they're that special. Looking at this collaboration as a whole, I think it's a missed opportunity. I think the Monkey Island stuff, there's a lot of good things that are here. A lot of things that could have been an amazing collaboration. I don't think it's as good as the Pirate's Life Tall Tales that we got in that collaboration, but there was some really great stuff. I said it with the first Tall Tale, and I think it's across the board with all three of these Tall Tales. I really love the voice acting and the voice dialogue that we've had in these Tall Tales. It really is what makes this unique compared to everything else we've had in Sea of Thieves, where it's not, you know, us just reading dialogue after dialogue, it's them actually talking and it feels alive. So that's one of the biggest and best parts of this collaboration, as well as just the environment. I've talked about this already, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but I really do love Melee Island and Monkey Island, what they made. They are really nice to explore. It would have been nicer if there's easier ways to explore them, specifically with Melee Island. If there was a way that you wouldn't have to every time do the first part of the second Tall Tale in order to openly explore the rest of the Melee Island, I think that would have been better for like replayability in terms of just going in and like walking around and stuff. But that's not the biggest deal in the world. They had some interesting things with these. Obviously, like the one big thing that they were talking about was zip lines. I think the zip lines were a little bit overhyped in my opinion. They're cool, but honestly, if they're not coming to the main game on like some of the bigger islands, like I had mentioned wanting in some of the previous reviews, then really I think it's just wasted mechanic. And honestly, I think the mechanic was already a little bit buggy in the first place. I had many times where like the zipline, if you jump off the zipline before it's gone all the way to the end, it will basically instant kill you, or at least that's been my experience, where even if I'm like just slightly above the ground and like right before the zipline ends, if I jump off, I just instant die. Maybe that's not how it's supposed to be, maybe that's a bug, or maybe that is how it's supposed to be. I don't know, that's just been my experience, and I don't know, I find that really not great. But if they could work on that, I think ziplines would be really cool to bring to the main game. And I would like to see some of the other stuff that was added in these Tall Tales added to the main game. I'd love to see voice acting become a bigger focus in the game when we have these adventures, rather than us reading a bunch of dialogue. It would be a lot more interesting to me if we had characters actually talking to us. So to wrap up my thoughts, because I don't know how long this video has been going on for, I'm assuming it's a pretty long time, so if you made it to this part of the video, I thank you for watching. I think the Monkey Island collaboration was a good collaboration. I'd rather have it in the game than not have it in the game, but I think it had some missed opportunity and could have been significantly better with some minor changes and some major changes. But that covers my thoughts on this Tall Tale as well as the Monkey Island collaboration as a whole. Let me know in the comments below, what did you think about this Tall Tale and the Monkey Island collaboration? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? I would love to hear all y'all's thoughts down there. But if you enjoyed this video, it'd be great if you hit the like and subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all later. Bye y'all.